I came out of uni, and then I did a 12-week personal training qualification, and I was still garbage.
Yeah.
And I was still pretty garbage at 30. Kind of 10 years later. It's taken another decade to start, to understand who I am as a coach. But I'm currently full-time at the Mercedes site in Brixworth. It's a massive site, mate. There's like 1,100 people working there.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I mean, but that's everything from the cleaners to guys working in the kitchen.
Everyone, yeah.
To right the way through up to the engineers and all of the directors and stuff. So it's a massive operation because there's a couple of other projects running there as well. So for the most part, you've got to think of it like a big kind of corporate well-being program. And that's kind of what we're doing for them. Is we are helping the staff to be fitter, healthier, kind of more productive.
Nice.
And we're using athletic kind of
elite level S&C to get it done. Yeah,
we're using S&C type principles, right, around physical activity, so like the entire kind of PE curriculum, like the adult PE curriculum that we've got is kind of laid out like a long-term athlete development program. Some of these guys have never done any physical activity before, and so it's about movement competency and quality of movement and improving their range of movement. And then between us coaches, then we've kind of split up and working on a couple of smaller projects. And one of my projects then is working with the mechanics and engineers who travel with the race teams. Yeah, but with those guys, you are absolutely right in terms of their working postures are weird because they're hanging over a car or they've got to be underneath the car. And so, but also, mate, their travel schedule is nuts.
Insane, yeah. I was friends with Jake Ackler from, he used to be Verstappen's Formula One performance coach.
Yeah.
I know him. Mate, he, same thing. It's like exactly like what you said there is stick a rugby boy in a Formula One thing and they ask you for form up and suddenly like, hang on, yeah, okay, sweet. Right, let's repackage this and then put it into another perspective. But how have you found this? Like, you've obviously gone from a huge team environment where it's massive. So you're in a team environment that's very individual now. How have you found the sort of transition as a coach as well, dealing with those sort of people? Because now you're not doing at Hartpury, they're basically professional athletes, but non-professional. Whereas you're now dealing with professional business people who are professional at their thing, but they're not elite level sports people. How have you found that as a transition, sort of passing over?
Firstly, you're a people performance coach. Like, you can call the job what you want, right? But you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
And so, the methods by which you do things, there's lots of different methods, but the principles that underpin them are few and far. They kind of, there's a finite number of principles that you can use. To steal a quote from Greg Glassman, we differ by degree, not by kind. We're human beings and we need to move, and we know the health benefits of movement, both physically and emotionally, and kind of the effect it has on your brain. And I've taken to thinking of these guys as kind of cognitive athletes, especially the engineers. Like, they are wicked smart cats. Do you know what I mean?
I can imagine, man.
And they need to be able to problem solve really complex things, to do that in a very tight timeline, to be actually incredibly creative in terms of, you've got these strict guidelines from the FIA and Formula One on, what the car can look like and what it can be like. And so there's so much kind of convergent thinking that needs to happen between the team, but there's also a lot of kind of lateral thinking and divergent thinking that needs to happen within the team as well. And so all we try and do, because every intervention or anything that I say is a good idea, because they're so data driven, it's like, right, prove it. Show us the data.
Imagine.
That's their expectation, which is great for us. And so we've done some little mini kind of case study, kind of pilot study interventions.
Awesome.
And so we've just done little 4-week studies of like the prevalence of lower back pain enormous throughout the company, just because they're either standing a lot, or they're sitting a lot, or they're stationary a lot, or they're working in some funky kind of positions.
Weird position.
And so we opened it up to people who wanted to come, and then we did some pre-screening. We did a little 4-week intervention, and we did some post kind of testing, and the results were great, firstly, but probably more importantly, we had a load of guys come into the gym environment, right? So the gym's beautiful, by the way, as you would expect. They spent
all bells and whistles.
Yeah. So it's not like an afterthought. This is they built it from scratch.
Yeah.
All right. And so, but we had guys coming in who they had signed up for the gym. They come for an induction, and then we hadn't seen them. All right, which happens everywhere. But they would come in for this, and because it was only 20 minutes, like around about lunchtime, they could come in, and they were doing it in their work clothes. So they're doing it in like the Mercedes uniform. In, they take their safety shoes off, and then they would just come in and they would do the 20-minute intervention because it wasn't too difficult. It was just some mobility work, a little bit of activation, kind of glute and kind of lateral trunk stuff, like what you'd call either a recovery session or some prehab, right? And we did it 3 times a week. The attendance was pretty good. There was about 80% attendance, which was great. But more importantly, what we noticed was the guys coming in their work clothes, like halfway through week 2, they were coming in and getting changed into kit.
Yeah.
All right. So you're already starting to see a mindset change now of, I'm feeling some benefit of this. And then right at the end of week 2, there were a couple of guys who just hadn't stepped foot in the gym for donkey's years, but they were coming in, they were doing the sessions with us, and all of a sudden, rather than them leaving the studio space we were using, they're walking through the other door and out onto the gym floor, and then going and jumping on a cross train, and then going and jumping on a cross trainer for 10 minutes. Like, that's just massive.
Like
in terms of behavior change, that's enormous, right? And for me, that's the bigger win, because that's kind of sustainable change, right? That's not me
long term.
Exactly. That's not me forcing that on someone. They're actually, these smart people have reflected on, I'm actually going back to work after lunch, and I'm not having the postprandial kind of dip that I normally have. because I've done something active, and I'm actually kind of able to re-engage, and I'm more productive in the afternoons. And we did something similar with kind of mindfulness. We've done similar stuff around getting them to understand the autonomic nervous system and how important recovery is. So we've done some we've done some more kind of recovery breathing type, again, kind of more mobility based kind of little 4-week pilot studies. And it's just incredible how, as soon as they see there's a benefit to their cognitive performance and their ability to output work, they're all in.
Yeah. I can imagine.
But it's the same with some athletes, right? There are some athletes who are fantastic at their sport. They hate S&C.
Absolutely, loads of them.
Right, and they hate the process. They don't care how much you tell them why. They just it's an extrinsic motivation. They are there because they know they have to be, and there's some kind of reward or there's a punishment attached to them coming to their S&C session, right? There's loads of players, rugby players, rowers I've worked with, you name it. And it's not until you can demonstrate some kind of performance enhancement or transference of what you've been doing to what they actually really love doing, that the buy-in's kind of created. And so honestly, it's a different demographic, but the processes of how we do it is like no different.
I can imagine.
No different.
It's like you said,
because it's a very male-dominated environment. So you can imagine what the banter's like in the gym. It's like
I can imagine.
It's like being around the team.
In a club again.
Absolutely. Like, and when you go for a briefing on a Monday morning after the race, like the restaurant's full. It's like almost like everyone will kind of stop working if they can, and they go to the briefing. It's like an analysis session.
I can imagine. It's so I'd be so similar, but so weird, but so good. And to say all three, it's because it's exactly this. It's just literally repackaging what you've done before. but just instilling, I suppose, instilling what you put into a rugby team into another form of team. That's as analytical. Do you take any? Are you talking about, as you said, they're into stats and stuff? Do you sort of biofeedback stuff like HRV, sleep analysis, all that kind of jazz, or are you more about the sort of holistic side, mindfulness, or are you trying to go through more the sort of calibrated metrics, or so to speak?
Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, I can imagine.
All of it. So, like for me, that coach intuition, like the best monitoring tool you've got is, how are you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
100%, man.
so when the guys do long haul, we know that they're going to be fairly beaten up, right? Because the travel's crazy.
Hideous.
We try and work with them before they go to work on their sleep, to work on shutting their kind of their body clocks a little bit. But we kind of having those discussions about the kind of pros and cons and benefits, because obviously it's a very small kind of demographic of the company.
Yeah.
So we suggest kind of guys, what gets measured gets managed, and if people want to track their own sleep and recovery, then we suggest like a Whoop band or an Aura ring or something like that. To kind of be able to track that,
give them the data for it.
Yeah, and we also share the pros and cons and the pitfalls kind of behind all of these things as well, because especially with regards to sleep, unless you're doing polysomnography, like there's always going to exactly, but it's like using the same set of scales all the time, right? As long as you're not chopping and changing from a Garmin to an Apple Watch to a Whoop band, then you're going to start to see how travel affects your HRV, your sleep quality, your energy levels, all those kinds of things. So
that's similar. That's what I do over here with I work with mainly executives, or I work with some teams. I coach quite a few fighters. I've started doing jiu-jitsu, so I coach quite a lot of them. So I've got sort of two ends, and Whoop bands or Aura rings seem to be the big ones over here, because it's weird. It's a similar thing, is they're numbers driven. Everything's numbers, and then as soon as you give them numbers, they're like, right, man, I've got to get my sleep. Whether it's right or wrong, it just means they get to bed a little bit half an hour earlier if they can, or if their HRV's dropping, they can then start associating what exercise to do with that. But like it's such a different animal, because like you said, rugby players. When we were at Hartpury, mate, I didn't care anything. It used to be about, apart from just lifting weights and going out and having a laugh. Where now it's all numbers driven.
It's funny how your mindset changes. Well, you'd be scared if it didn't change. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
If it doesn't change, you're not learning from your experiences, and I think that's kind of probably scarier than if you live the same year kind of 10 times, then you've only got 1 year's worth of experience, right? Do you know what I mean? And so like you should learn from everything, like And I was by the time we met, I was sliding down the other side of the Dunning-Kruger effect quite rapidly, because it was around about 2010. I was like super highly opinionated. I was certain of what I knew, and I was just literally calling out people left, right, and centre. You know what I mean? Like, and just and just like what a learning curve. I don't think I would have done it any other way. But like, you certainly do yourself a bit of damage in terms of the industry, because everyone knows everyone.
Absolutely.
And I'm glad I had that experience, because you've got to be comfortable hanging your hat somewhere and saying, this is how I operate and this is what I do.
You are. Yeah, totally.
But you don't do it and call out other people because they're not doing the same.
Like,
and that's why I tell people now, like, get yourself a mentor and listen to them.
Absolutely,
because
I agree.
At that point in time, I had no one really, and I was just I was pretty much kind of self-learned. I'd worked as a personal trainer. I'd worked in the private sector. I'd worked in the corporate sector with Nuffield Health. I'd done some more sports science-y type stuff. I just had a year with Gloucester, and coming off the back of that year with Gloucester into a head position at kind of Hartpury. I'm going to say head position. I was the only S&T coach, right? So I was the lead coach. I was and of course you just, with no one to bounce stuff off, you just become like caught in this echo chamber. And more certain of what you're doing is right, and I had no one to challenge that really, and it just it had me very certain of my beliefs, and another kind of 10, 11 years on from that, and all I'm certain of now is how much I don't know.
Yeah, totally can resonate with what you're saying.
And the amount of times that I sit with a couple of mentees I'm working with and just say, yeah, all that theory, it depends.
It depends.
You've got so much context with everything, from the sport you're working with, to the demographic you're working with, to the gender you're working with, to how the coaches then affect that and what they believe to be true. You might, you can write this. I literally had a chat with them yesterday about periodization, right? About the different types of periodization, about what it is, about what it isn't. Because there's this kind of misconception that periodization is programming, but it's not. It's the plan to allow you to program effectively to gain the right adaptations at the right time. And so you can write the most wonderful, beautiful, undulating
block or whatever,
block, and then the coach comes to you and says, but we're going to train twice a day.
Yeah.
Great.
Thanks
for that. Or you write this fantastic program, and you might have an athlete that's incredibly experienced. We had some athletes who knew their bodies really, really well, and they're giving them a program and go, but that exercise hurts my back, that one hurts my shoulder, I've had a slap tear kind of fix, so I can't do that one. This one aggravates my ankle because of X, Y, and Z. And it's like, well, but it's my program. I've taken the time to write it. You're bloody doing it. And it just doesn't work. No. And there's so many things that you've got to factor in. And that's where my heart is now, mate. It's like I've gone from trying to do what's best for me as a coach, and that was literally my first 5 years at Hartpury was let me demonstrate to people how good I am. And how much knowledge I've got, and how I'm able to apply that knowledge across every single sport that we've got, down to every single athlete that we've got. And then my role changed, and I went from being the S&C coach with 2 other full-time S&C coaches to starting to lead the entire performance team. So the lifestyle coach came under me, the nutritionist kind of came under me, and we had this what is now what you class as a full kind of support team. And I don't like the word management, so I didn't want to have that in my title. But having to lead and be responsible for younger practitioners, so I completely changed my mindset. So I can imagine. My heart now really sits with how I make other people better. And how I specifically make young coaches, or how I can impact young coaches more.
That's awesome.
Because if
you are very different. You are very different to Owen. You could tell by the way you're so much more calm. When me and you were playing rugby, mate, me and you were both fucking going crazy all the time, and like you said, I've still got those. I remember you gave me a load of PDFs. I've still got those for when you gave me them.
Well,
and I remember we used to talk shop up. Yeah. We used to talk shop up there, but it was about building people up. It's awesome.
But if you take that example, that's just me giving you someone else's knowledge.
Yeah.
Which is useful, but it's only useful if you're motivated to read it.
Yeah.
Right. And if you're somebody like you who's intrinsically driven enough to actually go ahead and read that and then come back and ask questions, that's great. But if they're not, you need to understand their motivations and where they're sitting in terms of things, and figure out a better way to actually not just impart knowledge, but impart wisdom.
Yeah, wisdom is a big one, man. Massive.
And so I'm more than happy to talk about all my mistakes.
Yeah.
All of them, and just kind of share them. Because not that you don't want
other people to... That's what makes you now.
Yeah, exactly. And not that you want people to not make their own mistakes, because I think that, part of learning,
etc.
Part of learning is that failure process. And falling on your ass every so often is actually no bad thing. but if you think about the value add, and so like my greatest job satisfaction was, you know, working with young kind of embryonic athletes, and then 3 or 4 years later, seeing them once they've left college, and knowing that I have had a teeny little impact on their long term, and not to long term performance, but actually who they are as an individual. I was speaking to a couple through lockdown. I've actually been in touch with quite a few kind of Hartpury alumni. And if you look at like the England women's kind of their rugby set, they're both in 15s and 7s. It's not just a little sprinkling of Hartpury kind of athletes.
No, it is. It literally
there's
is.
Loads, right? And so I've been having a
100%.
conversation, and I've been having a conversation with a couple of those guys recently, and like the sense of joy and satisfaction that I get when they start talking about their time at college and how it's impacted, you know, their performance and kind of getting them to an Olympic Games or a Commonwealth Games, but just also how they look back on with real fondness of their time there and how it's impacted who they are as a person. Like, that's incredible, right? Then that's kind of 100% job satisfaction for me. But then working with and trying to impact kind of the coaches, rather than me being able to impact 30 athletes at a time in a session or on the pitch, if I impact a coach and I can make a coach see things more clearly or understand where pitfalls and kind of caveats and kind of a lot of maybe some contradictions are in the industry, and actually help kind of navigate them through that and help them define and clarify their own kind of ethos and philosophy of how they're going to practice. Well, how many athletes am I going to affect then?
Of course.
When you impact one coach, you know, and that's kind of really changed my mindset in the past kind of 5 or 6 years, which is why you see so much of my kind of, if I do any kind of book recommendations or any posts, they're always very much driven around communication, relationships, mindset, a lot of things in it. A lot of things in and around business, but also I've really come, like you talk about me about being calmer. Ryan Holiday's work has kind of opened me up to kind of stoicism.
Of course. Awesome. Game changer.
Mate. Genuinely, like I've read, you know, his 3 big ones are: obstacle is the way, ego is the enemy, and stillness is the key, right? And obstacle is the way came at me at a point in time where it was almost, you know, serendipitous in its kind of in me
speaking to you, innit?
In me discovering, right? Because it literally blew my mind in terms of me reading it going, that's me. That voice, that's the voice in my head.
It's made.
And then just realizing that I can actually take control of that.
I something similar. When I came over to Singapore, I first 2 years were like a roller coaster, man. Like, my business went crazy and my learning curve went up. But I actually invested in an NLP coach who was more built around CEOs, because it was more, I was having self-destructive behavior, whether it was procrastinating or whether it was demonization of what I was doing, or I wasn't thinking I was good enough, all this sort of holistic side like you just mentioned. And he literally gave me 3 books similar. He gave me that one, Soul Without Shame, and something else. And at first I was like, mate, I'm not reading this mumbo jumbo horse shit about the soul. Mate, it's talking to your subconscious. Listen to it. My God, I literally rang him. I was like, oi, get on this Skype call. I need to talk now. It blew my mind. And I think the biggest thing that I've learned this year is I put huge lights on dark spaces of my personality and my coaching philosophy, but more so myself. I can see when I can just open a bigger viewpoint. And like you said, now it's even more, it depends. But like you said, mate, it's a huge
that's quite,
part of this.
That's quite Jungian, you know, we're talking about kind of, you know, your shadow, right? And everything that kind of lurks in the dark spaces. And, you know, I can relate all that stuff back to being in my teens as well, and just how I started, it opened my eyes and gave me an understanding of the why I was such a space cadet. and why and, and why I was so driven by kind of my emotions and impulse
Yeah.
and impulsivity, and just how my mouth would get me into trouble. And
Yeah.
it changed a lot of things for me. Another good recommendation that came to me actually probably just before that, now I'm reflecting on it, was a book called The 10% Happier.
Okay.
By a guy called Dan Harris. Those two books came at me at such a time and had such an impact on meditating. Affects how I am for the rest of the day. It affects my interactions with people. It actually means then that I'm not zapping my own energy by being aggressive and that real kind of type A personality of I'll do it, I'll take care of it. It actually made me more aware that I can get other people to do things to allow me to do the things that only I can do as a leader.
Massive.
And so it taught me how to be comfortable with delegating and to kind of quieten that voice down a little bit. And it was really noticeable. So one of our nutritionists, she would often say to me, she'd tap me on the shoulder some mornings and go, "You haven't done your meditation today, have you?" Like, and she would know.
Yeah.
She could tell. And so yeah, those two things really steered my practice. And they've had an effect on my home life as well, like with my wife and kids. Like it's been really all encompassing, which is great, you know. And
massive,
you can,
yeah.
and sharing all of these things with younger coaches and the teams that I've worked with, I've seemingly had a positive impact, you know. But one of the last things that I'd like to talk about, mate, is kind of on that theme, really, about the coach-athlete relationship or the athlete-coach relationship. Do you know what I mean? Like, and you've now sat on both sides of the fence for that.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've done that as well, but there was a time where I was being the coach and the athlete, trying to coach the coaches and be the athlete with the athletes. And I can hands down tell you now, that never works.
No, you definitely. Me personally, I think there's a fine line between being a coach and being someone's friend, and I think it's very easy to get those lines blurred. Like the more interpersonal you get with someone, the more you get involved in their relationships, their lifestyle, the sort of, they come to you and they've got issues and you're trying to resolve personal issues. I think unless you keep to your specifics of why they're with you. I mean, I've done it with being in. I've had clients of mine who've come to me asking for stuff, and I've got so friendly with them. They're going out for dinner and we're getting on the piss, and that we're being, because they're such great blokes. But that coach relationship has then become skewed, because if someone a performance requirement of whatever, nutrition or recovery, he looks at me and he'll look at me as a friend rather than someone who's someone of knowledge. And I agree, from being in professional sport when I was at Donny, and then going out of professional sport and coaching other rugby clubs, it was really hard to differentiate between, because I'm similar, like you said. I've always been sort of either the captain or a leader or a big personality in a rugby team. But as a coach, when I was younger, I'd still be that gestuous dude who was having a laugh and not taking this sort of this, not taking it seriously, but I was very emotional. If the session was going wrong, I would kick off, because it was, I didn't have it by the scruff of the neck to start with. Whereas now, I think, I assume you would have had the same thing, is when you step back and allow yourself to have the bird's eye view, reassess, and then go and use your external sources to help you, and knowing what's right for what they need to, what they're asking for. That's where I am now. Is there's a line, and I have to stay. I'm friendly, and I'll take in, and especially during COVID, it's been massive with my online clients. Is families president and families first. How many press ups you do doesn't matter at the moment. I've got guys here who are stuck in Singapore, whose families are stuck abroad. I'm not worried about. I'm more worried about their mental health than their. So I am being that leaning on, but the line is still drawn when it becomes. It's more of there's definitely a fine line between being a coach and being someone's mate in that situation. It's really hard, mate. But I think if you can't really, you've got to be part of the team. The team have got to know that you are the man at the front of that, and you're the one who's going to get it in the neck, or you're the one who's going to take the bullets to them if shit goes wrong. And I think that's what I've learned. But when I was an athlete, on the other hand, when I was with you, I didn't think that at all. I was like, shut up, you dick. I want to just pick up weights and play rugby. I didn't care. Where now, you see it totally other way around is when, because I mean, teaching at Hartpury, knowing the guys who are there now, who played at Hartpury and who are now, when I was there, they played with me on a Saturday. Then they were my teacher. I was friends with them, man. I love them to pieces. They were legends. But it's a different relationship. I could see how it could be construed in a different manner, I think.
Yeah, it is definitely a fine line. It's much easier working with that young demographic as you get older.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? When I started there, I was 29. And then
part of the boys, mate. Yeah.
I was 29 and I was working with guys who might be 22, 23, 24.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it was like, and there was that, you know, but then working with 16-year-old girls as a 39-year-old, it's much easier. Yeah. It's so much easier because I'm completely not done with the kids.
Yeah.
And you know, there's a generational divide, right? You know.
Yeah, massive.
You know, you're working with kids who were born after I graduated uni.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
I can imagine,
and it makes and it made that process much easier. What do you think? If you look at a coach that you work well with as an athlete, what was the differentiating factor, or the factors that solidified that relationship, as opposed to a coach that you really didn't connect or work well with?
I would think the number one would be, I knew that he had my best interests at heart. Whatever decision he was making a call for my best interest, whether it was good or bad. The big thing was he was doing it because he gave a shit. That's what I did. The best times I've been, as in from a strength perspective or from a perspective, it's always been, I know someone's got my back. And then when similar to what you mentioned before, is the snatch example, where some days you think you can rock a PR and you're not even lifting at 70%. As a coach now, like you said, you just brush it under the carpet. But I think as an athlete, having that coach who's got the sort of pedigree to just go, don't worry, man, it's good, we'll be fine next week, or who predicts the outcome of it, I think is a huge factor of proofs in the pudding. But like you said, it's individual. That's what I think with the two that I definitely hugely resonated when someone actually sat me down and gave me a reason, or kicked me up the arse when I needed it, or put their hand around me when I was last year, I was prepping for a fight to try and go, I was fighting in Singapore, and if I won that, I was trying to go to Vegas. And I was dieting hard. I'd lost 10 kilos in 12 weeks. And my coach, I remember him ringing me, and I was like, mate, I'm fucked. I'm emotionally, I'm done. And he just said, look, stop tracking your calories. Just go and have a dinner with your missus. And that was one of the biggest relationship things that I had, was he saw me and he knew I'd done all the work. I had it in the tank. I popped my knee the week before, which is fucking annoying. But I knew that that was massive for me, because I saw the results. I'd lost weight. I'd got in the best shape of my life, ready for this thing. And then, just having that, mate, it's okay, calm down, reassess, and get me back on the horse. That was huge. The personal touch.
But that comes back to coaching the person, not the athlete, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you know what I mean? That comes right back. That comes right back to almost the start of our conversation, really, which is perfect. You know, you talk about, like, it doesn't matter where you coach. It doesn't matter what, you know, if you're a sports coach, a technical coach, a sports therapist, an S&C coach, a personal trainer, and you're working with someone who's in their 80s and has got type 2 diabetes, or whether or not you're working with a young aspiring athlete or a pro who's been in the game for 15 years. It's like, they're a person. They've got a history. Yeah. They've got a history. They've made mistakes. They've got emotional ties to things. They've got cognitive biases. They've got an expectation of how things should be done, or this is the way I've always done things. They'll be superstitious. They'll be, like, completely irrational. But they're people, and so like.
How would you do?
Exactly. It's like, would you talk to an 8-year-old the same way as you talk to a 16-year-old? No, probably not.
No.
But if you want them to get them to change their behaviour, there's tried and tested frameworks and methods of doing that, and part of that is treating them like a person, not like not like an object or not like an athlete. Like, you want them to, you want them to see that you see past that, because it's the old Eleanor Roosevelt quote of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, very true.
I mean, and if you're trying to get somebody to make a behaviour change that is way outside their comfort zone, or to do something that they're really not motivated to do, unless they know that you've got their back and it's in their best interest, and you're not doing it just to try and make money, or that it's in your best interests, that's how you have success. That's how you have success.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Do you know what I mean? And it's you put other people first, and that's the and that's the absolute winner, because as you put them first, they'll start to put themselves first as well. And that changes their motivation then, and as their motivation changes, it builds their self-efficacy, and it builds their confidence to do the next thing that you're going to ask them to do, because they know it's coming.
Of course, and they bought in.
Yeah, exactly. And not only have they bought in, but they trust you, and they trust your vision for how to get them to where they want to be. And that's the beauty, and that's the beauty in coaching, is that it comes down to people at the end of the day. And putting that person at the center of the process, and then the outcome takes care of itself.
Mate, it's awesome. As I said, I haven't spoken to you for such a long time, and not that you weren't like that when I first met you, but you are such a different animal now. Obviously, we experienced take this, but it's wicked. It's so nice to hear. Like you said, the elevation of yourself and what you're saying is wicked, man. Like people that I've been working with in the last 6 to 10 months, as you said, mentoring. I do a lot. I've got quite a few people that I do look up to and I work with. But it's all that. It's all building a better person, building a better human, getting them into a better position, trust, all that kind of stuff. And it's awesome. Not that you didn't have that before, but before it was like, man, I can fucking tell you this, that, and the other, and I can do this. And now it's the total opposite. You're like, man, that's all right, I can do this. But
the thing is,
it's so good, so awesome to see.
There's a difference between the demonstration of your knowledge and your abilities, and actually, because there's no love in that. That's just that's completely narcissistic, right? That's just me looking in the mirror and putting myself on a pedestal and going, look how smart I am, everybody. And some people love that, and some people are so intimidated by that, and some people actually really gets their hackles up and they think you're a knob.
Absolutely.
And like it just come full circle to, okay, when I acted that way, I had some success with the people who thought that was a great way to behave. But actually, that was a very small percentage, because there's people over here who are either really intimidated by that and won't come and speak to you because you're not approachable, or there's people that will come and speak to you because they think you're an idiot. And so actually, how do I change my own behaviors and my own outlook to make sure that I can do all of those things? And it's I mean, mate, it's been like, there's still a long way to go, and that excites me now, because I'm like, I've seen the benefits in making the changes. It's also scary, because when you become aware of the fact that you know less than the things that you don't know. There's way more things that you don't know than the things that you know. Which is both exciting and frightening all at the same time, because you've got so much more work to do.
It's weird, isn't it?
And so many more people. And so many more people. But it also highlights how many more people you can help, which is
definitely.
Which is awesome.
Awesome. That's probably why we're in this game, I assume. Literally that is.
As a coach, you need to develop some kind of reflective kind of cycle of, what did I do? How did it go? How did I feel when I was doing it? Did I get anywhere near the outcomes I had in mind? Why didn't I achieve those outcomes? Why did I? What worked and what didn't? And then that's your loop. And I do that for my bigger plans, for my macro cycles, for my kind of 1-year plans, my 5-year plans, whatever you want to call it. I do that on each phase of a program that I'm writing for somebody. I do that even down to each individual bloody interaction I have with people now. Like when we're done here, I'm going to go away and reflect on everything on everything I've said. Have I put it across the way that I wanted to? What could I have said? What could I have said that was maybe better? What could I have said that would have been not just better way of saying it, but also doing things a little bit differently? And that will now affect the next conversation I have.
Of course.
Which is exactly how it should be, you know. And people talk about reflective practice and doing at the end of a cycle or the end of a season, right? Which happens naturally, but we have so many interactions that happen each and every day that could make us better. And if we don't pay attention to those micro interactions and events that happen, you know, we could get exponentially so much better in the course of the day because of the compound interest of thinking about, well, is that the right way to have spoken to that athlete? Should I not have shouted across the room? Should I have gone and actually just put a hand on the shoulder and just said to her, next time do this, rather than singling her out by shouting it across the room and making her feel like she's the center of attention when she actually hates that?
Of course.
If you can do that and catch yourself, and for me that's part of my mindfulness now as well, is being mindful of each of those things and realizing the power that's in the words that you use, or that you don't use. You know, and just keeping your mouth shut and just letting someone go. And actually, as a coach, sometimes the best part of coaching is taking the stabilizers off and leaving them go.
Absolutely.
Leave them figure it out for themselves.
Single swim.
Yeah, and as my kids have got older, that's been another big teaching tool of going, no, don't do that. No, don't do that. And I'm saying that because I know that when I climbed that tree and I hung off a branch that thin, it didn't end well.
No.
But how's he ever going to figure it out if I keep on telling him?
Yeah, I totally agree, man. You got it's massively empowering for him as well. As you said, he will learn. That's how you learn, rather than being, well, Dad told me this, rather than Dad showed me or I found out this. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the key thing. Like like probably finish things up because we're just over an hour now. But with a couple of mentees I'm working with right now, I ask more questions.
Of course, yeah.
Because I want them to try and to be able to figure things out.
That's awesome.
And so, whilst I hate having conversations where someone will say to me, "Oh, it depends," no, I try not to use that because it just complicates things. But I ask more questions than I've ever done before with people who are starting their kind of journey. And somebody asked me why I did that, and it's like, well, this is exactly it, because I want you to fathom it out yourself rather than being told. And so it's a great thing in the industry now to see so many coaches just willing to take the time for younger coaches. Like it was so hard 10, 15 years ago.
It was quite new, wasn't it? I think, especially when you came in, it was like they're trying to build a machine then, and they're just like, right, Owen, do this. Rather than it wasn't like if they walked into the job now, there's everyone bells and whistles to look after you, help you, blah blah blah. Back when you joined the joint, mate, it was like, right, sweet, downstairs at 7, man. I'll see you there.
I mean, you know, back in I was in uni 98 to 2001, and like you had to go to the library for stuff, man. Like you had to go and find a Russian test. Like you had to go and find special strength training for sports in the library, you know, or get them to order it in. You know what I mean? There was a couple of like online forums and stuff where you could find some, you know, really dodgy websites that had some kind of athletic development.
Mate, standard.
You know what I mean? but like it, the amount of information that's out there now is great, but it's also a blessing and a curse, right? Because how do young coaches figure out what's useful and what's not? And I think when you've been in the game a while, like I graduated 19 years ago now, and so I've been in the industry since that point in various kind of forms and iterations, and just to be able to be a bit of a navigating light for young coaches is like it's the favorite part of
it's awesome, man.
Of my coaching now. It's awesome. It's just awesome.
Well, it sort of sums up, and like you've been in that situation before, and you'd do anything to help anybody in this situation if you could see it again. It's like you're always gonna, and that's exactly what it is. And I can totally understand where you're from. Obviously, I've done as long as you, but I it's the reason why I go and I literally message people that I want to speak to. Because one thing it's very humbling when people are giving you the time and the time to actually just go through stuff. And you can see exactly what you're saying. I've been working with a fellow in Australia who's Owen Frank's SSC coach. I went to their gym. Kev Toonan, his name is. He works for 98 Gym, and he's every week just doing programming calls with me and 2 other people, just because. I when I went there, I was like, right, man, I want some help, because I've got a few guys over here who I'm dealing with a couple of international fighters, like a professional Spartan athlete, rugby players, etc. And I was just like, mate, I want to just see how you do it. And he was like, yeah. He's like, yeah, okay, sweet. Back in the day, if you asked that when I was 20, most people would have it'd been such an alien part of the industry. Where now, it's a huge part of people. Like you said, if you've been in the game for so long, giving back to it is obviously is as important or more important now than currently what you're doing. Which is wicked, man. It's awesome to see like how you progressed from a friend standpoint as well as a professional standpoint. Because now it's such a different. When I first sat with you, like I said, we sat there and you gave me 90 PDFs on whatever training strength coach black book of this, and now it's the opposite. We're talking about 10% happier, which is so awesome, man. But that's what it's about, and that's how you're going to develop way better coaches, 100%.
Absolutely.
Legend, awesome, man.
All right, mate.
Good to see you, brother. Cheers,
you
man.
too, buddy. Stay safe.
Catch you later, mate.
Ta-ra, man.
Take it easy, brother. Ta-ra.